Welcome to our July Sites Community Call, everybody. Today we're taking a closer look at site carbon and climate positive design. As those of you who've joined us before know, we at GBCI began hosting these periodic calls last year as part of our commitment to creating a safe space for our broader sites community of very dedicated practitioners. So here we convene, we provide program updates, detailed project presentations, and topical webinars. Recordings of all our past calls can be found on our website's education page, and these are a great resource. We encourage you to check out some of those topical webinars from past sessions. So thank you, Danielle, for jumping to our agenda page. A quick look at what we're going to be doing today after a brief sites program update and a quick overview of how carbon is addressed in the sites V2 rating system. We will hear owner and consultant perspectives from two of our leading experts in sustainability and landscape design. So Kevin Burke and Pamela Conrad are both pushing the boundaries for sites that embrace a climate positive design, and we will leave time for Q&A at the end of their presentations. That's my favorite part. A few housekeeping items. Please be aware that we're recording the session. As I previously mentioned, we will send out the recording to all registrants afterwards. We do encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat box and send questions right to the Q&A box. Please feel welcome to send those throughout the presentation. We'll try to get to all of them within our time together. As with previous community calls, this live session is approved for one site-specific CEU. The GBCI course ID will be shared with everyone for self-reporting in our materials post-session, so no need to grab that now. Thanks again for joining us today. I would like to turn it right over to Danielle Piranzi, who is our sites program lead. Danielle, it is all yours.
Thanks, Anna Grace. Let me turn on my video real quick to say hi to everybody. Hello and welcome again. I hope everyone's been staying healthy and having a nice, my slides are moving. Hold on one second. Looks like I lost control. Okay, sorry about that. I hope everyone's been staying healthy and having a nice summer so far. Sites was developed with rigor and flexibility in mind, applying to a wide variety of project types, but it's also viewed as a living product that will evolve over time as research and experience generate more knowledge. And today's call demonstrates that evolution to a degree. Before we begin, I'll share a couple of program updates. Many of you might know that sites and LEAD can be used in tandem, and to help with this connection, in June, we released the LEAD to Sites Readiness tool. The main purpose of this tool is to assist LEAD project teams to quickly assess their readiness and identify the gaps toward achieving site certification based on the LEAD credits they have achieved or anticipate achieving. In developing this tool, we also further streamlined the synergies and also identified new LEAD credits that comply with sites credits, in addition to the ones originally identified in the 2016 synergies document. In total, there are 21 LEAD V4 BD&C credits that have synergies and 20 LEAD V2009 credits. To the right is a snapshot of the last tab of this Excel document, which summarizes the results once you've gone through and selected yes for any LEAD credits you're pursuing, and the site's scorecard automatically populates. Here you can see it shows all the credits that the project might earn and the prerequisites as well. I selected yes on everything, and you can see here that now a LEAD project can qualify for up to 65 points towards site certification, when 70 points is all that's needed for the basic site certification. So hopefully this is a useful tool for some LEAD projects and sites teams. And here's some images of some of our projects that are pursuing both sites and LEAD, like the GSA government projects, city parks like this one in Atlanta, Georgia, coastal developments, and universities like this one at Arizona State University. Today, we have over 200 projects that have registered or certified with sites covering 38 US states and Washington, DC, and they're in 16 countries, as shown here. Here's a breakdown also of the various project types that are applying and certifying with sites. To date, we have about 78 certified projects and 11 pre-certified. And recently we even certified our first project at a zoo in Michigan. It's a meerkat exhibit, so stay tuned for that. So in light of today's topic of carbon, I want to briefly revisit the overarching sites goals, which some of you might be familiar with. These inform the rating system and specifically influence how credits points were allocated. These two goals focus on reducing carbon emissions and improving a site's ability to conserve and continue to sequester more carbon, among other things. And these goals are increasingly relevant and even more urgent. The carbon footprint of the built environment is often understood in terms of construction, energy use, and transportation. However, in order to effectively address climate change, rapid urbanization, and growing population, we must seek opportunities to also store and sequester carbon. And studies show that with concerted global action on land use over the next decade, nature can be a significant and necessary part of the climate solution, offering up to 37% of the mitigation needed in addition to fossil fuel mitigation. So the vision behind the site's rating system is to elevate the value of nature in our projects and communities, and also ensure optimal site performance. In the next slides, I'll quickly highlight some examples of where credits address carbon. So sites initially prioritizes conservation efforts where it can in some projects. Some projects don't have much to conserve. They might have a really degraded sites, but for those that do have healthy systems, its conservation is really critical to protect and not disturb the carbon already stored in soil and vegetation. And these four prerequisites here protect those functional systems. There's subsequent credits in the rating system that also conserve healthy soil and trees and other vegetation from disturbance. The site's design section considers all aspects of sustainable landscapes and outdoor spaces, including water, soil, and vegetation, and materials. For example, plants could not perform their function of sequestering carbon, regulating climate, cleaning air, and more if they were not supported in their growth by healthy soils. Unfortunately, soils tend to be overlooked in conventional development projects, so sites really highlight soils throughout the rating system, from conserving any existing healthy soil to properly restoring soils that have been degraded. Sites also encourages the use of native and appropriate vegetation on site. This helps reduce maintenance needs like excessive watering, fertilizer, and mowing, and this reduces carbon emissions also. Strategically planting vegetation over hardscapes near on buildings can reduce the energy load of those buildings and reduce urban heat island effect. And water, as many of us know, takes energy for it to be collected, treated, and pumped and delivered across the community. So any action that helps keep water on site and reduce water consumption will help reduce that energy use and associated carbon emissions while also conserving this precious resource. Restoring aquatic resources on site can also protect the system's ability to store carbon. Wetlands, for example, include some of the most carbon-dense ecosystems in our planet. Sites also looks closely at material selection, encouraging teams to purchase from sustainable suppliers and manufacturers, and promotes the use of regional, recycled, or salvaged materials, all contributing to lower energy and resource consumption, reduced emissions in transport, and a smaller carbon footprint. Sites helps to ensure that design takes into account long-term maintenance as well, and is communicated, implemented as expected during construction, including ways to address embodied and operational carbon, such as encouraging projects to use fuel-efficient, low-emitting, renewable, and electric equipment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions during the construction and operations phase, as well as reducing waste, fertilizer, and pesticide use, encouraging composting and recycling practices. So while numerous credits address carbon, we have been researching how to better quantify a site's performance, specifically a site's impact on carbon. Doing this research alongside the lead team and informed by the U.S. Forest Service, and of course, Pamela Conrad on today's call, who was a key resource in influencing this work. This has led to the development of a new pilot credit, which can be used under the innovation section of the rating system. It will be released in the next couple of weeks. The intent is to understand a site's carbon performance or impact and make improvements by reducing emissions and increasing carbon sequestration capacity. So here's an overview of the pilot credit. We wanted to provide multiple opportunities for engagement, from simply assessing the carbon on the site, and you can choose to assess the carbon sequestration capacity or the carbon emissions that the project might be emitting. And that's just basic assessment to really understand and quantify that. But then really pushing projects to also, for a higher threshold, encouraging projects to improve carbon performance in their final site design. And so this credit refers to tools like iTree and the Pathfinder app, which we'll hear about next. And now I'm honored to introduce our excellent speakers who will share their valuable insights and experience in addressing and quantifying carbon. Kevin Burke is the Director of Design at the Atlanta BeltLine. He has more than 3 decades of experience on a plethora of institutional, roadway, college, and university, residential, and park projects. He coordinates design and construction efforts for all public open spaces within the Atlanta BeltLine. He implemented the requirement that all Atlanta BeltLine projects initiated since 2018 will be site certified. He's going to share his team's efforts on the West Side Trail portion, the sites project, around lowering the carbon footprint. Following Kevin will be Pamela Conrad, principal at CMG Landscape Architecture and founder of Climate Positive Design. Pamela brings a strong ecological background to her projects and works on resiliency and climate change solutions. She's a recipient of the 2018 Landscape Architecture Foundation Fellowship for the development of the award-winning Pathfinder Landscape Carbon Calculator app that we'll hear about next, and the Climate Positive Design Challenge, products of an extensive research initiative which she is sharing around the globe and with us here today. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Kevin.
Great, thank you, Danielle, and good afternoon, everyone. And as soon as I can get this to work. Then of course it catches up. There we go. Just a quick overview for those of you who may not be familiar with Atlanta BeltLine. It is utilizing for about 60% of what you see between the solid and dotted lines, abandoned freight rail corridors that have been abandoned over the last 30 years. These corridors were originally built in the 19th century to bypass downtown Atlanta and rail traffic congestion. Our project, amongst job creation and economic development, will include modern streetcar and, as you'll see today, multi-use trail. I just love technology. Okay, well, the one that skipped over isn't that important. Just gives you a overview of our trails, 14 feet wide with shoulders. We have a linear arboretum with our partner Trees Atlanta. And in our open space, we have a warm season native grass meadow for creating a 22-mile, give or take, pollinator habitat. So we have basically 2 project types. One involves federal money and comes through the Georgia Department of Transportation, GDOT. The reason I mention this is primarily because we are not able to affect change in design mixes for concrete with GDOT at this time. I would hope that over the next 8-9 years or so that we can start to have those discussions, but currently we're constrained. The other, which does apply here, is what we call locally funded, and it used dollars from a tax allocation district, which most of the rest of the country would know as tax increment financing. We have a robust philanthropic group here in Atlanta that's been very supportive of the BeltLine. And recently, the City Council passed what we call SSD, a special service district, which applied a small mill rate to all multi-family projects over 10 units within a half mile of our corridor to help fund the completion of our 22 miles of trail. And we need to build out about 15 more. I just don't know if it's going to catch up or not.
Kevin, I can advance this for you if you want me to.
If it works better for you, let's do it that way.
Let's see what happens. Oops. I lost control as well. Okay.
Okay. So how did we come to choose concrete? Next. Primarily durability and maintenance. And you'll see in a little bit a cross section as to how we increase the durability. Next. Aesthetics, how it fits together as part of our overall design. We had an overarching goal when we made these decisions 10, 11 years ago to create a unique trail unlike anything else in the country as an attraction for visitors and residents, okay? Local climate. So one other option, and I've seen this, say in Seattle on the Burke-Gilman Trail, they use asphalt, and that works great in Seattle's climate. Here in Atlanta, the asphalt would get to be about 130 degrees or more in the summer, and nobody would be on our trail. Okay, next. Just a brief detail for our trail. It's 6 inches thick, has welded wire mesh, and that's mostly because we have H20 loading to support emergency vehicles on our trail. The plan view in the middle, instead of a yellow standard line that you see on trails all over the place, we have a double cut. And next. This just shows you what that looks like. Our mason, who's pretty much done all our trails, came up with a way to create dual concrete saw blades that cut this at the same time, which makes it much more efficient. Next. I just want to make clear that, again, there are some things we don't have too much control of at the moment, and particularly the outlet control structures on the right, the reinforced concrete pipe in the sort of background. Again, a lot of times these are either city or GDOT standards, and we can't affect changing those design mixes. Next. One of the ways in which I realized that we had a problem just in general was when I started looking at a recent construction project of ours and was seeing that a 7-day break on 3,500 PSI concrete was 100%. In this case, 115. I've seen them up at 150% of design, which you shouldn't hit until 28 days. And what it led me to realize is that these mixes, I think, have way too much cement in them. And because they're trying to meet these 28 days, they have to accelerate the hardening. And it's really sort of gone over the top. So we met with a company called Argos, which is a regional concrete supplier and pretty much supplies all the concrete to our projects. Next, Danielle. And worked at how we could revise our design mixes. And let me be clear, we're just at the very initial stages of this. Nothing's been finalized, so we hope to come up with some additional revisions that will improve it even more. Next. This again from Argos. I can't vouch categorically for these percentages, but the people we're working with, they're on board with trying to reduce embedded carbon in concrete and what needs to be used. So just consider these relative numbers across the various types that where we can affect change here. Next. They used a program or an app called Lifecycle 360, And based on our details that I showed you earlier, it's estimated that our concrete trails have a lifespan of about 36 years. And for us, this is important because we currently have a $22 million RAISE grant application, and Federal Highway was very interested in the longevity of our concrete. Next. And then my final slide, basically we can do this and have little to no cost impacts on our the base cost of our concrete. So all of this led me to, all of this in addition to seeing Pamela's work in LA Magazine and other places, to want to know what can we do better and the various methodologies to improve our embedded carbon footprint. So we have a contract for a trail design with Alta Design, and I was able to get Pamela added to the design team, and they're in the very early stages of helping us make the changes that will improve our footprint. So with that, I'll turn it over to Pamela.
Great, thanks so much, Kevin and Danielle. I will go ahead and share my screen here. And get right into it because we have a lot to cover. So as Danielle mentioned, I'm a principal at CMG Landscape Architecture in San Francisco. Work with about 40 or so wonderful landscape architects and urban designers. And our mission is to increase social and ecological well-being through artful design and advocacy. I've had the great pleasure over the last 8 or so years working with CMG to work on primarily focus on projects that are adapting to the effects of climate change. So Treasure Island is one of them, over 500-acre redevelopment in the middle of San Francisco's Bay, and the San Francisco Waterfront Resilience Program currently, which is looking at how are we going to adapt 7.5 miles of San Francisco's downtown waterfront. And it's been because of working on projects like these that I started to sort of ask myself a question, is there anything that we can do to start, not just adapt to these coming effects? What can we do to help prevent some of them from happening or slow them at least? And it felt helpful to find a reference from Architecture 2030 that shared that the urban built environment is essentially responsible for about 75% of annual greenhouse gas emissions in the world. That's what's causing temperatures to rise, reduction in air quality, increase of fire, and sea level rise. And to know that although there is a big portion of that comes from the buildings themselves, about 36% of those are coming from outside the building, the places that we design in the exterior built environment. The work that we create causes operational emissions through the ongoing maintenance and operations of our landscapes. There's also embodied carbon that is released through the extraction, manufacturing, transportation of materials to the site. But then what's really unique about the work that we do is we have this opportunity to sequester carbon through the landscapes that we design. And it caused me to ask the question, how can we reduce these impacts? How can we sequester more? And then how are we going to measure those impacts? And frankly, this question occurred to me on an afternoon. I thought I could go online. I'd probably quickly download a calculator and it would be able to tell me the impact of my project, that afternoon, so I could be working on it. And about 5 or so years ago, I found that just didn't exist. And so out of frustration and with my poor husband that I wrapped into it, as well as others, started building out a very crude spreadsheet just to understand the basics of our project impact. And keeping in mind, we're very sustainably minded, couldn't imagine what more we could do to make our projects more sustainable. And was kind of shocked. This is a waterfront park project. These projects that I'm going to show had already been designed and constructed, but this couple acre park was surprised to find out it would take about 15 years for itself to offset its own carbon footprint that was caused through its creation. And, that seemed kind of like a lot to me, actually, and starting to understand the numbers on the left, how much in red CO2 would be emitted and how much in green would be sequestered. But once we started to have the numbers in front of us, it became quite clear where the big offenders were, where we could have swapped out some materials to reduce the amount of embodied carbon, switched out some of our planting materials and converting things to, instead of lawn, having shrubs that would sequester more carbon, and then thinking about some of our ongoing maintenance regimes, like using gas-powered equipment that we could have converted potentially to electric. And so, those simple changes right there, instead of it taking about 15 years to offset that project carbon footprint, it could have been accomplished in 5. And really the design you see didn't change that much at all. Same performance, same quality, just better for the environment. And so this pattern started to occur time and time again through some case study analysis. And actually some of the results were more shocking than others. This tiny half-acre plaza project would take about 200 years to offset its carbon footprint, primarily because of the amount of paving materials that were used to support the programming events that we'd imagined there. But again, by taking a hard look at where the big offenders were, looking at that potential to add cement substitutions to our site concrete, like Kevin was talking about, adding a few more trees, adding a little bit more planting area, changing out some of our materials from maybe concrete to things like wood. Instead of it taking 200 years for that project to offset its carbon footprint, it could have been accomplished in 20. And again, the same quality, same performance, just a little bit greener. And it was with this, looking at many more projects and understanding this trend and pattern that was possible, it started to make me realize that, well, it's maybe not going to matter if just I change how I'm designing my projects or just my firm's changing how they're designing the projects. We need to actually have a movement. We need to change our business as usual as a profession. So if you were to look at the graph on the left, you would likely see from understanding our current, the way that we're designing and thinking, we'd likely see that we are emitting probably more than we're sequestering in our projects, a pretty significant amount over time if you start to think about it that over the next 30 years or so. But if we were just to make those tiny changes in those case study projects and our projects around the world, what we could see is that not only could we potentially be taking more CO2 out of the atmosphere by 2030, helping prevent the 1.5 degree tipping point, we could take upwards of about a gigaton of CO2 out of the atmosphere beyond our offsetting our project emissions. And I mean, that's a big number. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around it, but actually that 1 gigaton would find its way into the top 80 solutions that are listed in Drawdown, which is an initiative that lists 80 or 100 so strategies that when we implement them around the world, we can start to draw down greenhouse gas concentrations on an annual basis. The idea of this possibility of reversing global warming. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. Every little bit adds up. And if the numbers are still kind of overwhelming and don't really relate to the real world, that's totally understandable. But the reality is actually, if we can change our business as usual to reducing our emissions and increasing sequestration, there's a whole plethora of co-benefits that come from that in ways that support biodiversity, improve air and water quality. Lots of different things are connected, and ultimately our goal of protecting and supporting the most vulnerable communities that we know are going to be the most affected by climate change. And so it was with this that I was able to launch Climate Positive Design, an initiative with the mission of improving the carbon impact of the exterior built environment through collective action. I believe that we can rise as leaders in this challenge and bringing solutions to the table if we have the right tools, resources, and guidance to help us get there. And although this was, the beginning points of one, it has definitely evolved and expanded to lots of different volunteers, different disciplines around the world, all contributing to the cause. And a number of organizations are supporting the initiative as advisory partners to help track and improve the initiative over time. With the launch of the initiative came the guidance, the Climate Positive Design Challenge. So based on our findings, setting sort of targets for us for our projects, different project types, and how many years it will take for those projects to offset their own carbon footprints. And so based on case studies, those targets are 5 years for projects like parks or gardens, campuses, projects that are kind of inherently greener based on their programming, and 20 years to positive for more urban projects like plazas and streetscapes. And again, this collectively, with the intention is to add up to really making a significant contribution to the overall global crisis. And how everyone can contribute and meet the goals of the challenge is by logging and tracking your projects in the Pathfinder app. I was able to develop this with, as Danielle mentioned, through the LAF Fellowship, and through that was able to also bring on Atelier 10 to make sure that all of the metrics are aligned with industry standards, and the primary data that is in the back end for embodied carbon comes from Athena, and then for carbon sequestration comes from the US Forest Service iTree. So the app itself is designed to help us learn how to reduce carbon footprints and increase carbon sequestration on our projects. And it's pretty simple, and that was intentional based on feedback that I gleaned from my fellows and while in the fellowship, is to make it simple and easy and accessible, and my goal to keep it free for everyone to use. So it's pretty basic based on the ideas that we typically will have quantities of anything we're designing. Even if it's a sketch on a napkin, you can kind of understand some quantities at a very basic level. So how it works is that you provide the quantities of the designer, whether it's your materials or plants or your plans for operations and maintenance, and the app provides you instant carbon feedback. So red is bad for what you're emitting, green is good for what you're sequestering. And so with that, I'm just going to go do a quick demo here, walk through the app, and then we'll wrap up and have some time for discussion. So just launch into the website, climatepositivedesign.com, and I'm going to jump in, just show you a couple things real quick, and then just jump into the app. But I wanted to show you all that there are some resources on the resources tab. There is a design toolkit that outlines some of the strategies that Danielle was talking about. There are more case studies here for you to learn about strategies to incorporate into your projects. And there's a data report as well, if you'd like to know more about the metrics. And as a reference on the challenge tab, for future reference, the information about the challenge itself. Everyone that logs a project is recognized as a contributor on this page. So just trying to make sure that everybody is recognized for all of their efforts. And then on the calculate tab, you can go ahead and click on that. Scroll down, and if it's your first time, you can click use Pathfinder. All right, so if this is the first time you've been to the site, you can go ahead and just click get started. You can skip this when you come back the next time. But there is a basic explanation here for what do we mean by climate positive design. The two main toggles that we're talking about is the carbon we're emitting and the carbon that we're sequestering. And the basic relationship between the two, that the more carbon that we emit, the longer it takes us to offset that carbon footprint. And the more the carbon that we sequester, the less time it takes. Hence the idea of getting to positive as soon as possible. Just click on the check mark to move forward. And when we are getting started, it will ask you where your project is located. There's a bit of a lag, but bear with me here. So we're going to go ahead and, because we're talking about the BeltLine today, we're going to go to Atlanta. So we're going to go to, okay, we're going to go to Atlanta, where the project is, the West Side Extension project is located. And what we're going to do first is that you are going to just define the basic boundaries of your site. And so what you can do here is you just draw a polygon to outline that shape. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just giving you kind of a general sense of where your project is located. So I'll just get started here. Kevin, excuse all my imperfections in doing all this live, but we'll go ahead and just define the site boundary broadly. All right. This is a pretty decent sized site. I'm going to pan around just a little bit. All right. I think it's in the zone of 20 acres or so. So maybe on the larger side than what everyone is working on sometimes. Okay, so it's generally going to give you the overall site area. Click the check mark to move forward. If you want to finesse this to be more exact, you can go ahead and just enter it in here directly, and we'll just continue with that existing value. And so their first step is just to add some basic information about your project. West Side Extension. And this is a urban trail corridor. And I think it broadly will fit into kind of park and open space category, so we'll just drop it in there. And then let's see, Kevin, I think we're striving to finish this in the end of maybe or mid 2023. So we'll just go ahead and select that. So estimated completion date of the project. I'm going to use Imperial, but you can also select metric. And we're just getting going. I'll just select concept. This project is pursuing sites, so you can go ahead and check that box here. And now this project is expected to be built, so don't check this box, because if we're trying to understand the overall impacts of everybody's built work, if it's a study, academic study project, please go ahead and check that box so it's excluded from the overall kind of contribution that we're documenting. So then click Create Project. All right. And you can document an existing condition project if you want to set that as your baseline, or you can make design alternatives. So I'm going to say that this is our first design alternative. We'll just say option 1, and so this is a concept. All right, so click Create to get started. And what you'll see here is just a little, just some tool tips to get you going. You can just, it's showing you, you can search for materials, you can use the drop down category, and it's pretty straightforward to get going. You'll see the 3 primary tabs that I talked about before: materials, plants, and operations. And so let's go ahead and just get started here. And I'm going to get us going by adding in some paving materials that Kevin talked about. So I think we'll go ahead and just start with probably just go ahead and start with concrete, because that was kind of one of the first things that Kevin was talking about that we're going to work on. And so we'll go ahead and put in the amount that this is all made up. So this is just for test. Nothing's really here, but I'm going to go ahead and just drop in some numbers just to get this started. And you can see here, once you drop in the amount, the red number shows the embodied carbon emissions. If you want to learn more about some of the assumptions for this material, you can view details. And then here it's telling us that it's expecting 1 replacement over its lifespan, and a little bit more information for you. Okay, so that's our pedestrian concrete. Then maybe we'll put in some walls. And let's say a concrete sidewall. We'll go ahead and do, let's see, maybe 3,000 square feet or so. Say that those are just a foot wide and maybe 10 inches tall. Okay, again, I've got our walls in here. I think maybe there's some stone that we would want to add to our wall itself. And again, we'll just go ahead and mimic that. All right, so we've got some walls, we've got stone cladding. I think we also have, want to make sure you add in your rebar here, so we can go ahead and add in the reinforcement as well. And that was for it's showing you some assumptions. You can just go ahead and plug in the area. All right, so that gets us started. And we'll just go ahead and move over to the next category in plants to show you how that works. And so I think there's, as Kevin, as you can see from the images, there's some trees and some plants. So we'll go ahead and you can see the different categories here. And we'll start with adding in some trees. Let's just pick that we've got some deciduous medium-sized trees. Pick your growth zone where your project's located. This is regionally specific sequestration data. And I'm making guesses here, some quantities. And then we'll go ahead and add in some more. So you can start to see as I'm plugging these in here, the gray number showing up for how much that element is now sequestering. So that's pretty straightforward for the trees. And then we can add in shrubs. And you can just scroll over to show, how much area you have generally, or you can type it directly in, toggle between deciduous and evergreen, and that gives you kind of a rough estimate of your quantities that you'll be planting. So we'll confirm that. And what you start to see here in the lower left-hand corner is that now that we added in planting material, our years to positive has started calculating because we're able to now sequester carbon. And based on what I just entered, we're looking pretty good. It's telling us that we are 2 years to positive and our target for this project type is 5 years. So that's a good way to start. I'll also add in a couple more things just so you can see some more categories. Maybe we have some lawn areas here. And let's see your lawn. You can switch the dimensions based on what you have available. And interestingly enough, because of the intensive management that it takes for some certain types of lawn, this is actually showing it as a net emitter. And so just flagging that there might be some things that you see in here that you're surprised by, and it's because they're emissions that we're not always thinking about. And then lastly, I'll go to operations, and you can start to see the different categories that are included in here. It goes from things like fertilizers, different equipment type. Is there demo happening on your site? Are you impacting existing trees or soil? And so we'll go ahead and anticipate that we might be impacting some trees on this site. And so we'll just say that maybe there's a few large deciduous trees that we've impacted, and is asking you essentially a question about what are you going to do with those? Is there a possibility to convert them into timber that could be reused in buildings? Are you mulching them? Could you also collaborate with the biochar facility to have that carbon still stay in the biomass as a soil amendment material? So we'll plan on for right now that we're just having about 20 trees that are going to be mulched, and you can see then that because of that, most of the carbon that's stored in the mulch actually gets released back up into the atmosphere. That shows it as a net emitter. And then lastly, I'll just include soil disturbance for regrading the site to also think about that. Every time we disturb the soil, organic matter dies and releases carbon to the atmosphere. And so then we'll go ahead and put in a number for that. Okay, that is still, we're in the zone of our meeting our goals of our challenge, but at this point in time, we've kind of got a high level understanding of where we are. So for you to better understand that, you can see your overall project stats. There is a project scorecard that's developed for that information that we just input. And so we can do to start to analyze that a little bit. I find this graph pretty useful that it breaks out your emissions to understand where are the biggest offenders. This is showing from our paving, our lawn's actually pretty significant in this example. And so where I would start is, is there something that we can change about either of those to start improving our impact? And as a quick change for that, we would see that we could actually potentially, in our paving, we could use pedestrian concrete with cement substitutions. And if we enter in the same area or volume, what we'd see here, as Kevin was talking about, the difference in emissions between a typical concrete and one that's using cement substitutions. And so we might want to select this one instead, get rid of this one. And that's a way to start improving that overall impact. And then see, I think we've got that covered. There are design suggestions at the bottom that's going to help you with understanding some of the things that you could improve about your project. And then you can change any of this at any point in time. So you can, as I mentioned, you can turn this into an existing condition through these tools here. You can duplicate this and make small changes. You can create new versions and change any of the things that we entered in. So that's kind of a high-level overview. All of your projects are stored in your account database, so you can set up one account for your whole office or your team, or you can do it individually. And this eventually, shows you your projects, and you can come back and edit them at any point in time. All right, and so I think that we are running a little bit behind, so I'm just going to kind of wrap it up with a few closing thoughts so we can have some conversation. But people always ask, how's it going? Are people using this? Are people doing this? And the good news is we're close to 2 years in. The first year impacts were pretty incredible. How many people are getting involved, how many projects were logged, and what those overall impacts equate to. And so that's pretty fantastic. People are rising to the challenge. And we're starting to understand and see those improvements over time. And it's with this information that we're able to better understand and help inform things like the new sites and leads credits coming out related to landscape carbon performance. And why all this is important, it's because of measuring. We're better able to evolve as a profession over time. It influences how we design, practice, we can advocate and educate and communicate the next generation. At CMG, we're envisioning a new type of urban landscape, one that's climate positive as a top priority. We're looking at innovative ways to use lower embodied carbon materials like wood. We're getting creative about things that we find on site, like boulders, to incorporate into our design. We're taking plant community restoration more seriously through afforestation, closely monitoring our material selection and reducing site grading, and having conversations with our clients about this, all of the steps along the way. And as Kevin mentioned, really looking forward to this great opportunity to work with ABI and Alta on the BeltLine project. We're looking to analyze prior completed work so that we can understand kind of what the baseline condition is for the BeltLine and helping inform our performance targets going forward, and then helping the team every step along the way while helping to inform these pilot credits that we've been talking about. And the kind of questions that we're going to be asking ourselves as a team are, how can we reduce the emissions of the paving? Can we plant more trees or shrubs? Can we use more recycled or local materials? Can it be maintained with electric equipment? Can we minimize lawn? Can we use less water? Can we increase cement substitutions? Use organic fertilizers? Reuse wood on site? Reduce the disturbance of soil? Restore forests and ecosystems? And reduce the below ground infrastructure? And again, looking for creative ways to use materials with lower embodied carbon, do more with less, potentially protect our soil carbon, and incorporate multi-layered planting strategies. So I know that that's been a lot, and I will still leave you with a call to action. There's so much everybody can do. So please get involved. Appreciate any initiative that people can contribute to logging your projects, using the resources, and starting to ask manufacturers for more transparency in the global carbon impact of their materials. There's lots of things that need to be improved, and we'll continue to improve with the Pathfinder. But we are already taking this beyond just the profession, getting out, working multidisciplinary, and helping to start informing how we can contribute to the global conversations like the Paris Agreement at COP26 in November. So that's it for me. I think I left 10 minutes for conversation. Thank you all for your patience, and for GBCI for having us, and for ABI as a collaborator. Really appreciate everyone.
Thank you, Pamela and Kevin. I am going to pull up our question. That was really fantastic and so impressive. Thank you both for your forward-thinking leadership. It's very exciting to have this tool available to clients and to the community. Thank you for filling that gap in the need for landscape site design. So this is really exciting. So let's jump over to our questions. See. Okay, our first question in the Pathfinder calculator is what you're inputting the visible size, and the software assumes footings or additional material. I think I'm reading that correctly.
Yeah, you need to make sure to add it. You provide the quantities that you have available, and then make sure to add in the footings in addition. So there's a little line for a concrete footing in there.
Great. There's another one. What level of detail will be required to be entered for the site's pilot credit using the app? All materials used on site. Also, is there a minimum amount of reduction required? I can answer this. So this is, we would like all materials considered to be inputted into the Pathfinder app for this. And the minimum amount, right now we're saying 10% reduction in CO2 emitted or 10% increase in CO2 sequestered, or a combination of 20% improvement using those two methods. So it depends. We're trying to leave different opportunities for engagement, but there'll be different ways you can either measure just simply carbon emissions or sequestered carbon, or do both for total site carbon performance. Let's look at some other questions here. Okay, here we go. When you mentioned wood, the benches in that photo were made with tropical hardwoods, the highest embodied carbon material on the planet. Wood does not equal wood, does not equal wood. Why do people promote wood, and when it takes some real sustainable selective logging to actually have wood products be climate positive?
So I can take that one. I'm not totally sure which wood bench was referenced. The ones that I was showing in our projects, as if we were getting creative with the use of wood, almost all the wood that we've been using recently is all local reclaimed wood. We have a couple artists who are, also have large mills in the area. Many times we're, if there's trees that have been fallen, they collect them, and we're oftentimes reusing them on the site. Sometimes they're coming from warehouses that have also been decommissioned. So I definitely don't encourage the use of tropical hardwoods, and there are a lot of good alternatives depending on the region that you live in to those. But Kevin, anyone else want to join in on that one? Feel free.
No, I mean, we don't support use of tropical hardwoods either. And there's been some work done by, and I'm having a brain cramp now, the head of the department at NC State. She's going to kill me because I'm speaking at ASLA with her. Anyway, who's written up alternatives to ePay and others from Europe and some other locations. And we've tried to use black locust for some of our installations. And frankly, we've had problems with it. The water capacity, it warps, it cracks. So that's still, and we may just gotten a bad batch, I don't know, but as Pamela said, we don't support use of tropicals either.
And that is a similar approach for sites as well. See other questions. Sorry, I'm scrolling through this live. Let's see. Is climate positive design expensive, and how do we address related costs?
That's a good question, and I think Kevin started to address that in his slides by talking about it. So Kevin, do you want to share what you were finding, and I can follow up?
Well, we're early in our process with Pamela, but I mean, we've looked at things and we're trying to match material selection with longevity, with durability. Concrete on a site wall in a residential garden, I realize the impact is the same, but has a different, to me, frame of reference and selection process than our multi-use trail. Our multi-use trail provides a durable means for people to get out of their cars, to ride bikes, to restaurants, to shopping, to work. So yes, there's carbon in concrete. One of the things we're looking forward to is seeing what's the offset based on our trail counts to date of the number of trips that we've eliminated by providing the trail. You know, in terms of, was it expensive to hire Pamela so that she could get more work? Of course, I'm going to say no. No, but I think the point is, whether it's Pamela or you do this on your own, it's something we need to do. And if it helps you reduce your impact long-term, then how do you monetize the cost of that? It's really something we should be doing. I'm not saying that, you know, you have a project, you have a budget, but I think from what I've seen, the Pathfinder will help you. I mean, you could look at it and say, if I replace this with this, it's this, but it's going to cost me, I'm picking a random number, 4 times the cost. You know, those are decisions you have to make.
Right, and I think going back to that, I always like to kind of keep this one simple. Maybe I oversimplify it, but if you look at the cost per square foot of planting versus paving, I mean, there's something to the ratio of just starting a site design with really maximizing the square footage or the ratio that you have for planting, and that's a cost saver right there, and that's a good starting point for you, and oftentimes it's actually more cost effective that we're doing, you know, that we're planting more, that we have greener solutions. I think, you know, there's always going to be new and innovative products that are coming off the market as substitutions, and so that's where you see, you know, the price point increase as a new fancy substitution. You know, those things will evolve and eventually get cheaper. But I don't know, I think keep it simple, plant as much as you possibly can as a starting point, and that will generally lend it to be cost effective.
Yeah, and if I could, I was trying to keep to my 10 minutes, but I just want to make a brief comment before we run out of time. You know, what we're going to do on the Atlanta BeltLine is not going to save the world, but we're taking a small step. And I think, as Pamela's graphics demonstrated, if all of us as designers take those small steps, then it aggregates to something that really makes a difference. And I think that's how each of us needs to look at this.
Very well said, Kevin and Pamela. Thank you. Let's take maybe one more question. Can you tell us more about environmental product declarations and how we input them into the Pathfinder?
Yeah, for sure. I actually, and Danielle, if it's okay, I'm going to share my screen just so I think it's easiest to share an example of what environmental product declarations are. So this is what an environmental product declaration looks like. This is a voluntary form and process that manufacturers can go through to be upfront about the global warming potential or the CO2 emissions from their products. And so, you know, this is you're seeing here, there's many things that are, you know, addressed. This global warming potential CO2 equivalent here, this is primarily what we plug into the Pathfinder. And so I think I like to reference it when maybe LEED first started, you know, people, you know, started asking the question of manufacturers, well, how much percentage recycled content is in this bench, because I need it to meet my LEED credit. And so I think actually asking for environmental product declarations is a great way to have an even greater impact in what we're already doing. If we can change the manufacturing industry, that's a whole nother level of improvements. And so I definitely encourage everyone to start asking the question, do you have an environmental product declaration? And starting to collect these. Actually, there's a really great reference called the EC3 tool. And so on the EC3's website, it actually gives you this form that's already pre-populated and how to make, you know, here's a pre-populated template for you to make an EPD request, which is super helpful as a starting point. And when you go to the EC3's website, you can also, it's a database of a whole bunch of environmental product declarations. So if there's something that you're not seeing in the Pathfinder, you could potentially find it, material in the EC3 tool, get the EPD, look for that global warming potential number, and in the Pathfinder, you can actually add a custom material element, maybe that doesn't already exist in there, just by getting that information. And so when you are in, let's say you're in the site elements at the bottom, you see create a custom material, and the screen pops up. You can name it, drop it into a category, input that number I just showed, the global warming potential, which is the kilogram equivalent CO2 per unit, and hit create element. And what you'll see is it will pop up here, and you can add as much quantity as you want. So, so I think that's a pretty impactful way, I think, for people to take away and to start learning more about it. It is an international standard, and so it's regulated, and it can be used anywhere in the world.
Wonderful. It's a great use of just collaboration, applying that and collecting this information. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We've gone over. I know we could continue to talk, and we have some questions unanswered, but we will answer those after the webinar. Thank you again, both to our speakers, our excellent speakers, for what a really inspiring and informative conversation, and looking forward to using these tools. And I hope everyone else does as well on this call. Just wrapping up. Here we go. Just wrapping up with our next events coming up, everybody, to save the dates for our next community calls in October and December. And we have a couple events also at Greenbuild Resilience Summit and the ASHE Global Conference on Sustainability in Higher Education for anyone that's interested. And again, as usual, if you would like to hear a topic for a future community call, please do email sites@gbci.org. Thank you all for attending and participating, and especially for our speakers, Anna Grace and Paul in the background helping out. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.